two helicopters screaming down onto a suburban street, a governor on his knees begging, and one exhausted man with blistered feet who'd just lost everything, holding the only chance to save a dying girl. This is the story of Dr. Evan Cole, the neurosurgeon who walked 10 miles with $12 and a choice that would change thousands of lives. But before the miracle surgery, before the national headlines, before anyone knew his name, there was just a fired doctor, a hungry son, and a principle he refused to abandon. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The Arizona sun didn't care about ruined lives. It hammered down on the asphalt with the kind of merciless intensity that turned air into soup and made breathing feel like work. Heat shimmers rose from the highway shoulder in wavering curtains, distorting the distance, making the world look as unstable as it felt. And through it all, Dr. Evan Cole walked. 42 years old, 5'10", dark hair going silver at the temples, wire-rimmed glasses sliding down a nose slick with sweat, and in his arms, a cardboard box that contained everything his office locker had held that morning before security escorted him out. 2 framed photos, a coffee mug that said, "World's Okayest Dad," a gift from Noah on his 8th birthday, a stethoscope he'd owned since medical school, the rubber tubing cracked in 3 places, 1 wilted potted succulent, a spare tie, and beneath it all, folded with care despite everything, his white coat with Dr. Evan Cole, neurosurgery, embroidered in blue thread over the left breast pocket. He'd worn that coat for 11 years. This morning, they'd asked for it back. The walk from Mercy General Hospital to his apartment was exactly 10.3 miles. Evan knew because he'd mapped it once during better times, back when he thought he might bike to work to save on gas. He'd never actually done it. Life had been too busy, too full of surgeries and consultations, and Noah's soccer games and parent-teacher conferences, and all the 10,000 ordinary things that filled the days of a single father who was also a surgeon. Those days were over now. The termination meeting had lasted 7 minutes. Evan had timed it, watching the clock on the wall above Dr. Patricia Hendricks' head as she'd delivered the news in the flat, rehearsed tone of someone who'd done this before. Human Resources Director Martin Sheffield had sat beside her, silent, his expression locked in professional neutrality. "Dr. Cole, as of 9 a.m. this morning, your employment with Mercy General Hospital has been terminated effective immediately." Evan had simply stared at them, the words not quite landing. "I don't understand." "The unauthorized surgery you performed on Saturday night violated multiple hospital protocols," Dr. Hendricks had continued, sliding a document across the desk. "You were explicitly instructed not to proceed. You proceeded anyway. The hospital cannot and will not tolerate such flagrant disregard for established procedure. That woman would have died." "That woman," Sheffield had interjected, his voice carrying the particular coldness of administrative authority, "had no insurance, no ability to pay, and no legal guardian to authorize the procedure. You exposed this hospital to enormous liability. She had a subdural hematoma. She had maybe an hour before brain herniation. There wasn't authorization, Dr. Cole." Dr. Hendricks' face had been stone. "And without authorization, what you did wasn't heroic medicine. It was reckless endangerment of hospital resources." The phrase had hit him like a slap. Hospital resources. As if the woman, Margaret Chen, 73 years old, grandmother of 5, had been a line item in a budget report rather than a human being bleeding into her own skull. "She's alive," Evan had said quietly. "She'll make a full recovery." "That's fortunate for her," Sheffield had replied. "But it changes nothing for you. Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings. Your final paycheck will be mailed within 7 business days. Any questions?" Evan had looked between them, these 2 people he'd worked alongside for years, and realized with sudden clarity that they'd already moved on. He was already gone in their minds, already erased. "No," he'd said. "No questions." Now 4 hours later, his feet were screaming. He'd made it maybe 6 miles. And the cheap dress shoes he wore, the ones he saved for hospital meetings because his surgical clogs weren't appropriate, had begun destroying his feet around mile 3. Blisters on both heels, the left one definitely bleeding. His shirt was soaked through, sweat running in rivers down his spine. The box felt like it weighed 50 pounds, and he still had 4 miles to go. Evan shifted the box to his left hip, trying to redistribute the weight. His phone was in his pocket, shattered. He'd dropped it in the hospital parking lot when security had walked him out, watched it hit the concrete and spiderweb into uselessness. No way to call an Uber, no way to call anyone. He checked his wallet in the hospital parking garage. $12, 2 5s and 2 1s. Because he'd been planning to hit the ATM on his way home Saturday night after the surgery, except the surgery had run 9 hours, and by the time he'd gotten out, it was 3 a.m., and he'd driven straight home to relieve the babysitter and collapsed into bed beside Noah. $12 wouldn't get him a cab, wouldn't even get him halfway. So he walked. A car rushed past, close enough that the wind displacement nearly knocked him sideways. The driver laid on the horn, whether in warning or mockery, Evan couldn't tell. He kept walking, one foot in front of the other. Just keep moving. It was the same thing he'd told himself in residency during the 30-hour shifts, the same thing he'd told himself through fellowship, through the first terrible year after Sarah died. The same thing he'd told himself every single day since then, when being a full-time neurosurgeon and a full-time single parent had felt like trying to hold water in a clenched fist. Just keep moving. But his body was starting to rebel. His vision blurred at the edges. The heat was relentless, and he'd been out in it now for hours. He'd finished his water bottle around mile 4. That had been over an hour ago. A gas station shimmered into view about a quarter mile ahead. Evan aimed for it like a drowning man spotting land. The air conditioning inside hit him like a physical force, so cold after the furnace outside that his skin prickled with goosebumps. He stood there for a moment, just breathing, letting his core temperature drop from lethal to merely dangerous. Help you? The kid behind the counter, maybe 19, bored expression, name tag reading Tyler, glanced up from his phone. Just need a minute. Evan set the box down, rolled his shoulders. Everything hurt. He walked to the cooler and back, stared at rows of water bottles and sports drinks and sodas, all of them glistening with condensation, all of them impossibly desirable. He pulled out the cheapest water bottle he could find, $1.79. At the counter, he also grabbed a pack of Band-Aids, $3.49. Tyler rang him up without interest. $5.42. Evan pulled out his $12, stared at the bills in his hand. If he bought the water and the Band-Aids, he'd have $6.58 left. Noah needed dinner. A frozen pizza was maybe $5. That left $1.58, which wouldn't buy anything useful. But if he skipped the water and the Band-Aids, he'd have enough for the pizza and maybe a small carton of milk. It wasn't really a choice. Actually, just the Band-Aids, Evan heard himself say. He put the water bottle back on the counter. Tyler shrugged, voided the water. $3.73. Evan paid, pocketed the change. $8.27. Enough. In the bathroom, he peeled off his shoes and socks. The left heel was worse than he'd thought. A blister the size of a quarter, ruptured and bleeding. The right wasn't much better. He ran cold water over them, hissing at the sting, then dried them carefully with the rough paper towels and applied the Band-Aids. It helped, but not much. When he came out, Tyler was watching him with something that might have been curiosity. "You okay, man?" "Long day," Evan said. "You walking somewhere?" "Home." "Where's home?" "Still about 4 miles. Tyler whistled low. "In this heat? You got water?" "I'm fine. There's a drinking fountain by the bathroom." Evan had noticed it, but it was one of those push-button ones that barely gave you a trickle. Still, it was better than nothing. He went back and drank until his stomach sloshed, trying to hydrate against the miles still ahead. When he picked up his box again, Tyler called out, "Hey, you want me to call you a ride or something?" For a moment, Evan was absurdly touched by the kindness. "Thanks. I'm okay." "You sure? You look pretty rough." "I'm sure." Outside, the heat hit him again like a wall. Evan took a breath, adjusted his grip on the box, and started walking. Just keep moving. The miles began to blur together. Evan's thoughts drifted in the heat, memories surfacing without permission. Sarah's laugh, the way she'd throw her head back when something really got her. The first time he'd held Noah, so small and red and screaming, and felt his entire world reorganize itself around this tiny creature. The acceptance letter to Stanford Medical School, His first surgery as an attending, hand steady, everything he'd learned crystallizing into action. And then the diagnosis. Stage 4. 6 months, maybe less. She'd lasted 8. 8 months of fighting and hospitals and terrible choices and moments of grace scattered like jewels among the horror. And then she was gone. And it was just Evan and Noah, a 5-year-old who asked every day when mommy was coming home until finally he stopped asking. That was 7 years ago. 7 years of building a life in the wreckage. 7 years of being both parents, both everything. 7 years of Noah's school plays and skinned knees and homework and bedtime stories. 7 years of surgeries and overnight shifts and sleeping 3 hours a night and running on coffee and willpower. 7 years of being so tired he sometimes forgot what it felt like to not be tired. But they'd made it work. He'd made it work. Because Noah needed him, and that was all that mattered. And now? Now he'd been fired for saving someone's life. The injustice of it burned hotter than the sun overhead. Evan had replayed the Saturday night surgery 1,000 times in his head since the termination meeting. Margaret Chen had been brought in by ambulance at 10:47 p.m., unconscious, unresponsive to painful stimuli, pupils unequal and dilating. The CT scan showed a massive acute subdural hematoma with significant midline shift. Without immediate surgical intervention, she would die. Maybe in an hour. Maybe in 2. Evan had called Dr. Hendricks, the on-call administrator. He'd explained the situation. He'd explained the urgency. And Dr. Hendricks had said no. No insurance, no next of kin present, no authorization, she'd said over the phone, her voice clipped. We cannot take on that liability, Dr. Cole. Transfer her to county. County's 45 minutes away. She doesn't have 45 minutes. Then make her comfortable. But you do not operate without authorization. Do you understand me? Evan had understood. He'd understood perfectly, and then he'd scrubbed in anyway. The surgery had taken 9 hours. The hematoma was worse than the imaging had suggested, the bleeder harder to find. But Evan had found it, clipped it, evacuated the blood, and closed. By the time he'd emerged from the OR, it was nearly 8 a.m. Sunday morning. Margaret Chen's vitals were stable. Her pupils were equal and reactive. She would live. Dr. Hendricks had been waiting for him outside the surgical suite. We'll discuss this Monday morning, was all she'd said. Evan had known, even then, how it would end. But he hadn't cared. Couldn't care. Because Margaret Chen would wake up and see her grandchildren again, and that was worth whatever consequences came. Principles over profit, Sarah used to say. That's who you are, Evan. Don't ever let them take that from you. Well, they hadn't taken it from him, but they'd taken everything else. Mile 8 appeared in the form of a cracked, faded street sign that marked the boundary into his neighborhood. 2 miles left. Evan's legs were beyond pain now, settled into a numb, mechanical rhythm. Left foot, left, right. The sun was lower now, thank God, the worst heat of the day passing. But Evan was badly dehydrated despite the water fountain stop, his lips cracked, his head pounding. Dark spots swam in his vision. Just keep moving. His building came into view around 5:30 p.m. 3 stories of aging stucco, palm trees out front that always looked half dead, a parking lot full of economy cars and sun-faded paint jobs. Unit 2C, 2nd floor, home. Evan climbed the exterior stairs on legs that barely responded to commands, each step a separate negotiation between will and body. At the door, he had to set down the box to fish out his keys, and when he bent over, the world tilted sideways, and he nearly fell. Not here. Not when you're this close. He steadied himself against the doorframe, got the key in the lock, pushed inside. The apartment was quiet. Noah would still be at his friend Michael's house. Evan had arranged it Saturday morning, figuring he'd pick Noah up after his shift, before everything had fallen apart. Evan set the box on the kitchen counter and collapsed onto the couch. For a long moment, he just sat there, breathing, letting his body remember what it felt like to not be moving. Then he pulled out his wallet, $8.27. He'd stopped at a grocery store on mile 9, bought a frozen pizza for $4.99. That left $3.28. Enough for milk, maybe. Enough for something. His phone was dead. The shower was calling. But first, He needed to pick up Noah. Evan forced himself upright, every muscle screaming protest. In the bathroom, he peeled off the Band-Aids and assessed the damage. Both heels were raw meat, the right one starting to look infected. He cleaned them as best he could, applied fresh Band-Aids from the box, changed into clean clothes. In the mirror, he looked like a ghost, pale despite the hours in the sun, eyes hollow. The face of a man who'd walked 10 miles and lost everything. But Noah couldn't see that. Noah needed to see Dad, steady Dad, Dad who had everything under control. Evan practiced smiling. It looked wrong, but it would have to do. Michael's house was 6 blocks away. Evan walked it because he had no other choice. By the time he knocked on the door, he'd rebuilt the mask, relaxed posture, easy smile, voice steady. Michael's mother, Jennifer, opened the door looking concerned. "Evan, I tried calling. We were getting worried. Noah said you'd pick him up hours ago." "Phone died," Evan said, which was true enough. "Sorry about that. Got held up at work." "Is everything okay? You look... Just a long day. Is Noah ready?" She called up the stairs, and Noah came thundering down, 12 years old and all energy, his dark hair sticking up in 7 directions, and his glasses slightly crooked. When he saw Evan, his face split into a grin. "Dad, can I stay for dinner? Jennifer said they're ordering Chinese and..." "Not tonight, buddy. We should get home." Noah's face fell, but he didn't argue. He grabbed his backpack, said his thanks, and followed Evan out into the evening air. They walked side by side, Noah chattering about his day, about the video game he and Michael had played, about the science project due next week. Evan made the right noises, asked the right questions, but inside he was calculating. Pizza for dinner, the last of the milk in the fridge. He had maybe enough for Noah's school lunch tomorrow, but after that... "Hey, Dad!" Noah's voice cut through his thoughts. "You okay? You're walking funny." "Just sore feet. I'll be fine. Did you walk home from work?" "Sharp kid. Too sharp." "Yeah, actually, car trouble." "What kind of trouble?" "The kind that means I walked home." "That's like 10 miles. 10.3. Noah whistled, impressed. "That's crazy. Why didn't you call someone?" "Phone died, remember?" They reached the apartment. Evan unlocked the door and Noah headed straight for his room to dump his backpack. Evan went to the kitchen, started the oven for the pizza. While it preheated, he filled a glass with water and drank it in one long pull. Then another. His body soaked up the hydration like desert sand. "Dad?" Noah appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Can we have movie night?" They did movie night most Fridays when Evan wasn't on call. Pizza, Noah's choice of movie, the two of them on the couch until Noah inevitably fell asleep against his shoulder. It was tradition, but Evan was so tired he could barely stand. And tomorrow, he had to start figuring out how to rebuild a life from $12 in principles. Still, Noah was looking at him with such hope. "Sure, buddy, you pick." Noah's grin could have powered a city. He ran back to his room to set up the movie while Evan slid the pizza into the oven. 20 minutes later, they were on the couch, pizza on paper plates because Evan hadn't had energy to wash dishes. Noah had picked some animated superhero movie Evan had seen approximately 900 times. It didn't matter. Noah was happy. Halfway through, Noah shifted closer. "Dad?" "Today at Michael's, his mom was talking about how her hospital is hiring. I heard her tell Michael's dad that they really need doctors." Evan's chest tightened. "Yeah? Are you looking for a new job?" The question hung in the air between them. Evan could lie, should lie, keep Noah out of this for as long as possible. But Noah was 12, not 6. He deserved something closer to truth. "I might be," Evan said carefully. "Things are changing a little bit at work." "Changing how?" "Just changing. Nothing for you to worry about." Noah was quiet for a moment, then, "We're going to be okay though, right?" The question broke something in Evan's chest. He pulled Noah closer, pressed a kiss to the top of his head. "Yeah, buddy, we're going to be fine, I promise." "Okay." Noah settled back against him, apparently satisfied. On screen, the animated hero was giving an inspiring speech about never giving up, about fighting for what's right, no matter the cost. Evan watched numbly, feeling the irony of it like a blade between his ribs. He'd fought for what was right. He'd saved Margaret Chen's life, and it had cost him everything. But as Noah's breathing evened out, as his son drifted toward sleep against his shoulder, Evan thought about the choice he'd made, thought about Margaret Chen, who right now was probably sitting up in her hospital bed, talking to her grandchildren, alive. Would he make the same choice again, knowing the cost? The answer came immediately, without hesitation. Yes. Every time. Without question. Because some things were worth more than a job, more than security, more than any amount of money. Some things were worth everything. Principles over profit. Noah's weight against his shoulder was warm and solid and real. Outside, the desert sun was finally setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. And in this small apartment, with $8.27 to his name and no idea what came next, Evan Cole felt something unexpected. Peace. He'd done the right thing. Whatever came next, whatever hell he'd have to walk through to rebuild, at least he'd done the right thing. That had to count for something. It had to. Later, after he'd carried Noah to bed and tucked him in, Evan stood in the kitchen staring at the cardboard box from his office. Tomorrow he'd have to start making calls, finding a new job, figuring out how to survive until the first paycheck. There were decisions to make, problems to solve, a future to construct from ruins. But tonight, he was too tired. Tonight, the 10-mile walk had finally caught up with him. Evan went to his room, collapsed onto the bed still fully clothed, and was asleep before he could even take off his glasses. He dreamed of walking, endless miles of asphalt stretching into forever, the sun burning overhead, the horizon always the same distance away. In the dream, he carried Noah on his shoulders and the box in his arms, and somehow Sarah walked beside him, her hand in his. "Keep going," she said in the dream. "You're almost there." "Almost where?" She smiled, that brilliant smile he hadn't seen in 7 years. "You'll know when you arrive." Morning came too early and brought reality with it. Evan woke to sunlight streaming through blinds he'd forgotten to close, his body one massive knot of pain. Every muscle screamed. His feet felt like they'd been beaten with hammers. For a blessed moment, he didn't remember why he hurt this much. Then it all came rushing back. He lay there, staring at the ceiling, watching the fan blades rotate in slow circles. 6:47 a.m., according to the clock on his nightstand. Noah would be up soon, expecting breakfast, expecting normalcy, expecting Dad to have all the answers. Evan had exactly $8.27, a broken phone, no job, and no plan beyond making it through today. He forced himself upright, wincing as his feet touched the floor. In the bathroom mirror, he looked worse than yesterday, eyes bloodshot, skin pale beneath a sunburn he hadn't noticed acquiring. The face of a man who'd walked too far and hadn't stopped falling yet. But Noah couldn't see that, so Evan washed his face, changed the band-aids on his ruined heels, put on his glasses, and constructed the mask. Dad, who had everything under control. In the kitchen, he started coffee with the last of the grounds. The refrigerator held precious little, half a gallon of milk that would expire tomorrow, some cheese, a few eggs, condiments. The freezer was empty except for ice cube trays. The pantry offered a box of pasta and a can of tomato sauce. Evan stood there doing math. 2 eggs for Noah's breakfast. The pasta and sauce could stretch to 2 dinners, maybe 3 if he ate less. The milk would last through Wednesday if Noah was careful with his cereal. After that, he needed money, which meant he needed a job, which meant he needed to start making calls. Except his phone was shattered, and replacing it would cost money he didn't have. The coffee maker beeped. Evan poured himself a cup, black, and stood at the kitchen window watching the parking lot below. A few early risers heading to work, climbing into cars, starting engines, driving off to jobs they still had. Normal Monday morning routines. The world continuing as if nothing had changed. For them, nothing had. "Dad?" Evan turned. Noah stood in the doorway, hair sleep mussed, wearing his favorite Minecraft t-shirt and pajama pants. 12 years old and still young enough to think his father could fix anything. "Morning, buddy. Want some eggs?" "Sure." Noah climbed onto a stool at the kitchen counter. "Can I have the computer after breakfast? I need to finish my science paper." "Sure thing." Evan cracked eggs into a pan, scrambled them with the last splash of milk. Toast would have been good, but they were out of bread. He served Noah's portion on a plate, ate his own standing at the counter. Dad, you're eating standing up again. Just thinking. About what? About how I'm going to feed you past Wednesday. About how I'm going to pay rent. About how I destroyed our lives trying to save a stranger. Work stuff, Evan said. Nothing important. Noah ate his eggs, studying Evan with that too perceptive gaze he'd inherited from his mother. You seem worried. I'm fine. You always say that. Because it's always true. Noah didn't look convinced, but he didn't push. He finished his breakfast, put his plate in the sink, and headed to his room to get ready for school. Evan washed the dishes by hand, letting the hot water work some of the stiffness from his fingers. Through the window, he watched more neighbors leaving for work. Normal lives, normal problems. His phone, what was left of it, sat on the counter where he'd emptied his pockets last night. The screen was completely destroyed, spiderwebbed into opacity. He pressed the power button experimentally. Nothing. Dead. Which meant no calls, no texts, no emails. No way to job hunt except in person or using Noah's computer, and Noah needed that for school. The public library, then. They had computers. He could go there after dropping Noah at school, start sending out resumes, making calls from their phone. Except he needed a working phone number for callbacks, which meant he'd have to get the cheapest prepaid phone he could find, which cost money he didn't have. Evan set down the dish he was washing and braced both hands on the counter, head down, breathing through the rising panic. There had to be a way through this. There was always a way through. He just had to think. Dad? Noah appeared again, this time dressed for school. Can I get lunch money? The question was so normal, so everyday that it nearly broke Evan. How much do you need? $5? That's what you usually give me. $5, which would leave him with $3.27, which wouldn't even buy a prepaid phone. Actually, buddy, I packed you a lunch today. Evan opened the refrigerator, grabbed the cheese and what remained of yesterday's pizza. You've got pizza and some cheese sticks. That work? Noah's face fell slightly, but he recovered fast. Yeah, that's fine. Evan packed the lunch, trying to make it look like more than it was, and handed Noah his backpack. Bus comes in 10 minutes. Okay. Noah hesitated at the door. Hey, Dad, when you get a new phone, can I have your old one? Even if it's broken, I bet I could fix it. Something in Evan's chest cracked. Sure, kiddo, it's all yours. After Noah left, the apartment felt impossibly quiet. Evan stood in the kitchen, drinking terrible coffee, staring at $8.27 spread out on the counter. This was it. This was everything between his family and complete disaster. He couldn't afford to mess this up. The computer was old, a laptop Noah used for school that Evan had bought secondhand 3 years ago. It wheezed to life slowly, the fan making concerning noises. Evan pulled up his email, started scrolling through contacts. Dr. James Morrison, Chief of Neurosurgery at Desert Vista Medical Center. They'd done their residencies together. Evan typed out a careful message. Hey James, hope you're well. I'm currently exploring new opportunities and wondered if Desert Vista might have any openings in neurosurgery. Would love to catch up if you have time. He hit send before he could overthink it. Next, Dr. Sarah Chen at Phoenix Regional. They'd met at conferences, shared mutual respect. Another email, similarly worded. Then Dr. Robert Hayes at Saguaro Valley Hospital, and Dr. Michelle Torres at Sunrise Medical. 4 emails. 4 chances. 4 possibilities. Evan sat back, staring at the screen. The truth was gnawing at him. News traveled fast in the medical community. By now, everyone probably knew what happened at Mercy General, knew he'd been fired for defying orders, for operating without authorization. Some would see it as reckless, dangerous, a liability. Some might see it differently. He had to hope there were enough in that second category. His email dinged. Already? Evan's heart jumped, then sank when he saw it was from the hospital billing department. A reminder about his outstanding balance for Noah's emergency room visit last year when he'd broken his arm. $847, payment overdue. Evan closed the email without responding. One problem at a time. Another dang. This one from his landlord. Rent reminder. $1,250 due Wednesday, January 21st. Please ensure timely payment. Thanks, management. Wednesday. 2 days away. Evan checked his bank account, even though he knew what he'd find, $127.43. His last paycheck had covered last month's rent and utilities with almost nothing left over. The next one, whenever it arrived, would be his final check from Mercy General, and with his abrupt termination, he had no idea how much it would be or when it would come. Even if it arrived today, it wouldn't be enough. A week's pay, maybe two? At most, $3,000, which would cover rent and leave him with barely enough to survive until, what? Until he found another job that would take weeks to start, weeks more before the first paycheck? The math didn't work. No matter how he calculated it, the numbers didn't add up. He was going to lose the apartment. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He'd known things were bad, but seeing it laid out in numbers, in dollars and cents, made it horrifyingly real. In less than a week, maybe two, he'd be evicted. Him and Noah, out on the street with nowhere to go. Evan closed the laptop and put his head in his hands. Think, there has to be a solution. There's always a solution. But his mind kept circling back to the same impossible reality. He needed money now, and he had no way to get it. A knock at the door startled him out of the spiral. Evan wasn't expecting anyone. For a paranoid moment, he wondered if it was already the landlord coming to press about rent. But through the peephole, he saw Jennifer from Michael's house, holding what looked like a casserole dish. He opened the door, forcing a smile. Jennifer. Hi. Hi, Evan. I hope I'm not interrupting. I just wanted to drop this off. She held up the dish. I made way too much lasagna last night, and I know you've been so busy with work. Thought you and Noah might appreciate a home-cooked meal. The kindness of it nearly undid him. That's really thoughtful. Thank you. Of course. She handed it over, then paused. Listen, I don't mean to pry, but yesterday when you picked up Noah, you looked pretty rough. Is everything okay? Just a long day. I'm fine. Evan. Her voice was gentle but firm. Michael mentioned that Noah said something about you maybe changing jobs. So Noah had been talking. Of course he had. Kids always knew more than adults gave them credit for. It's a possibility, Evan admitted. Nothing definite. Jennifer studied him with the practiced eye of a mother who could spot a lie at 50 paces. If you need anything, and I mean anything, please ask. Michael adores Noah, and you've always been so good about having him over when I needed. Let me return the favor. I appreciate it, really. She didn't look entirely convinced, but she didn't push. Well, the offer stands. Anytime. After she left, Evan set the lasagna in the refrigerator. It was massive, easily enough for 6 meals. Maybe more if he stretched it. The unexpected kindness had bought him a few days, at least in terms of food, but it didn't solve the real problem. His email dinged again. Evan pulled up the laptop, expecting another bill. Instead, it was from Dr. James Morrison. Evan, good to hear from you. Unfortunately, we're not hiring in neurosurgery right now, and to be honest, I heard about what happened at Mercy. That took guts, man. Margaret Chen's son called me yesterday. He's a friend of my wife's. Said you saved his mother's life, but between you and me, that kind of guts makes hospital administrators nervous. I hope you land somewhere that appreciates what you did. Best of luck. Evan read it 3 times. It was supportive, even admiring, but the message was clear. Nobody was going to hire him, not after this. He'd made himself radioactive. The other responses trickled in over the next hour. All variations on the same theme. No openings. Heard what happened. Impressive, but risky. Good luck elsewhere. By noon, Evan was staring at 4 rejections and a future that looked increasingly bleak. He needed to get out of the apartment, needed to move, needed to do something other than sit here watching his life collapse. He grabbed his wallet, still containing $8.27, and headed out. The public library was a mile away. Evan walked it, his feet screaming protest with every step, and settled into one of the computers in the back. For 2 hours, he applied to every neurosurgery position within a 100-mile radius. Hell, within 200 miles. He filled out applications, uploaded his resume, wrote cover letters that tried to explain the unexplainable. I believe in putting patient care above protocol when lives are at stake. My commitment to ethical medicine is unwavering, even when it conflicts with administrative policy. I was terminated for performing a life-saving surgery on a patient without insurance authorization. No matter how he phrased it, it sounded like exactly what it was: a confession of insubordination. A red flag the size of Texas. By 3 o'clock, when he had to leave to meet Noah's bus, Evan had submitted 19 applications and received 0 responses. He walked home trying to construct a plan for the evening: lasagna for dinner, which Noah would love. Then homework, maybe some TV if there was time. Normal routine. Keep everything normal. Noah bounded off the bus full of energy, talking about the science paper he'd submitted, about something funny that happened at lunch, about plans with Michael for the weekend. Evan listened, nodding at the right moments, while his mind calculated and recalculated the same impossible math. At home, Noah settled into homework while Evan reheated the lasagna. The apartment smelled amazing, rich with garlic and cheese and tomato. For a moment, Evan let himself pretend things were normal, that this was just another Monday, that he'd go to work tomorrow, that the world wasn't ending. "Dad, this is really good." Noah looked up from his plate, sauce on his chin. "Did you make this?" "Jennifer brought it over." "That was nice of her." Noah took another bite, then paused. "Hey, can I ask you something?" "Sure, buddy." "How come we don't eat like this more often?" The question was innocent, but it landed like a blade. Because the answer was money, which Evan couldn't say. "We do okay. I know, but, we always have pasta or pizza or whatever. Not that I'm complaining, but Michael's family has stuff like this all the time, and I just wondered why we don't." Evan set down his fork. "Because Michael's mom doesn't work 60-hour weeks as a surgeon, buddy. She has more time to cook." "Oh." Noah considered this. "So if you didn't work so much, we'd have better food?" "It's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because working pays for the food we do have, and the apartment, and everything else." Noah frowned, processing. "So you have to work a lot to make money, but working a lot means you can't cook good food. So we spend money on easy food, which costs more." Out of the mouths of 12-year-olds. "Something like that. That seems like a trap." "Welcome to adult life, kiddo." They finished dinner in comfortable silence. Noah went back to his homework, and Evan cleaned up, then checked his email on the laptop. 3 more rejections. One hospital hadn't even bothered to send a personal response, just an automated, "Your application does not meet our current needs." Evan closed the laptop and rubbed his eyes. Tuesday tomorrow. Rent due Wednesday, no job, no prospects, $8 to his name. He needed a miracle. That night, after Noah was asleep, Evan sat at the kitchen table with a pad of paper and tried to map out options. He could borrow money, but from whom? He had no family, no close friends with that kind of cash. He could sell something, but he owned almost nothing of value. His car was 15 years old and barely running. It might fetch $1,000 if he was lucky. His furniture was secondhand junk. Sarah's wedding ring, which he still wore on a chain around his neck, was the only thing worth real money, and he'd rather die than sell that. He could try to negotiate with the landlord, ask for an extension. But the management company was corporate, faceless, the kind that followed policy without exception. He was trapped. Completely, utterly trapped. Evan put his head down on the table, exhaustion and despair crashing over him in waves. He'd walked 10 miles yesterday. He'd fought so hard for so long to keep everything together, and it still wasn't enough. Maybe it was never going to be enough. Principles over profit, Sarah used to say. But what good were principles if they left your kid homeless? The knock at the door came at 10:47 p.m. Evan jerked upright, confused. Who the hell knocked this late? His first thought was the landlord, though that made no sense. His second thought was police, though he couldn't imagine why. Through the peephole, a man in his 60s, well-dressed, gray hair, expensive suit, not the landlord, not police, a stranger. Evan opened the door but left the chain on. "Can I help you?" The man's face was lined with worry, his eyes red-rimmed like he'd been crying. "Dr. Evan Cole? Who's asking?" "My name is David Chen. I'm Margaret's son, your patient, the one you operated on Saturday." Evan's hand went still on the doorknob. Is she okay? Did something happen? No, no, she's fine. She's doing wonderfully. David's voice cracked. I'm here because I needed to thank you in person, and because I heard what happened, that you were fired for saving her. Word travels fast. My sister works in hospital administration. She told me this morning. David's eyes glistened. Dr. Cole, my mother is 73 years old. She raised 5 kids by herself after my father died. She has 14 grandchildren. Yesterday she was teaching my daughter how to make dumplings. She was laughing and joking and alive because of you. Evan didn't know what to say. I just did my job. You did more than your job. You threw away your career to save a woman you'd never met. A woman with no money, no insurance, nobody to advocate for her. David pulled an envelope from his jacket. I know you can't take payments from patients directly, but you're not employed by the hospital anymore. So there's no conflict. He held out the envelope. Evan stared at it. Mr. Chen, I can't accept money from you. It's not a payment, it's a gift. For my entire family. We pooled everything we could. Mr. Chen, please. The word was almost a sob. Please let me do this. You saved my mother's life. Let me help save yours. Evan took the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a check, made out to him, for $15,000. His vision blurred. He had to brace against the doorframe. That's not... Mr. Chen, this is too much. This is insane. I can't... My mother is worth more than every penny in the world. David's voice was steady now, fierce. And you gave her back to us when everyone else said she didn't matter. Please, take it, use it, get back on your feet, and when you do, save someone else's mother. Evan looked at the check, at this impossible gift, at David Chen's face lined with gratitude and grief and hope. He thought about rent due Wednesday, about Noah, about the 19 job applications that would probably all end in rejection, about principles over profit, and what good those principles were if you couldn't survive to practice them. Thank you, Evan whispered. Thank you. David nodded, satisfied. Thank you, Dr. Cole. My family will never forget what you did. After he left, Evan stood in the doorway holding a check that represented more money than he'd seen at once in years. Enough to cover rent for months. Enough to buy time to find a job, to rebuild, to breathe. He'd saved Margaret Chen's life, and she'd just saved his. Evan closed the door and stood there in the quiet apartment, staring at the check in his hands like it might disappear if he looked away. $15,000. The numbers seemed almost fake, too large to be real, too perfect to be anything but a dream he'd wake from any second. But the paper was solid between his fingers. The ink was real. David Chen's gratitude had been real. Evan walked to the kitchen table and sat down heavily, still holding the check. His hands were shaking, not from fear or exhaustion this time, but from something else entirely. Relief, maybe, or disbelief, or the crushing weight of realizing just how close to the edge he'd been standing. $15,000 meant rent, meant food, meant breathing room to find a job without desperation clawing at his throat every second. It meant Noah wouldn't have to know how bad things had gotten. It meant survival. But more than that, more than the money itself, it meant Margaret Chen's family had seen value in what he'd done, had seen it as something worth this kind of gratitude, worth this kind of sacrifice from their own pockets. You gave her back to us when everyone else said she didn't matter. Evan pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes, trying to hold himself together. He'd spent the last 36 hours convinced he'd destroyed everything for a principle that nobody else cared about, that he'd been a fool to throw away his career for a stranger. But Margaret Chen wasn't a stranger to her family. She was a mother, a grandmother, a teacher of dumpling making, and probably 1,000 other small precious things. She was a whole universe of connections and love and importance, and Dr. Hendricks had wanted him to let her die because of paperwork. Evan lowered his hands and looked at the check again. He'd done the right thing. He'd known it in his gut from the moment he'd scrubbed in against orders, but knowing it and having it validated were two different animals entirely. He stood up and walked to Noah's room, pushing the door open quietly. His son was sprawled across the bed in that boneless way kids slept, one arm flung over his head, mouth slightly open. 12 years old and still young enough to believe his father could fix anything. Evan had been terrified he was about to prove Noah wrong, terrified that in a week or a month he'd have to tell his son they were losing the apartment, that they had nowhere to go, that Dad couldn't actually fix this one. Now he didn't have to. Now he had time. He pulled the door closed and went back to the kitchen, opening his laptop. The bank's website loaded slowly. Evan took a photo of the check with the laptop's camera, endorsed it, and deposited it through the mobile app. The confirmation screen said it would be available in 2 business days. Wednesday morning, just in time for rent. Evan closed the laptop and finally let himself breathe all the way out. The tightness in his chest loosened fractionally. Not gone. There were still too many problems for that, but eased, manageable. He made himself a cup of chamomile tea, the only thing in the cabinet besides coffee, and sat at the table trying to think through what came next. The money solved the immediate crisis, but it wasn't a permanent fix. He still needed a job, still needed income. $15,000 wouldn't last forever, especially not with a kid to support. But for tonight, it was enough to let him sleep without nightmares about eviction notices. Evan finished his tea, checked on Noah one more time, and went to bed. This time, when sleep came, it came easy. Tuesday morning arrived with sunshine and the sound of Noah's alarm blaring down the hall. Evan got up, made breakfast from the last 2 eggs and some of Jennifer's lasagna, reheated into something resembling an omelet, and sent Noah off to school with an actual packed lunch instead of yesterday's desperate pizza arrangement. After Noah left, Evan sat down with the laptop and pulled up his email. 3 more rejections had come in overnight, all politely worded variations of no thank you. He read them without the crushing despair of yesterday. The money from the Chen family had bought him time to be patient, to wait for the right opportunity instead of taking whatever scraps he could find. Or so he told himself. The truth was, nobody was offering even scraps. Evan spent the morning applying to more positions, casting his net wider this time. Not just neurosurgery, but general surgery positions, consulting work, even teaching positions at medical schools. Anything that would use his skills and pay enough to support Noah. By noon, he'd submitted 12 more applications and received 0 responses. He made himself a sandwich from the last of the cheese and stood at the kitchen window eating it, watching the world outside continue its normal rhythms. People going about their lives, unaware that Evan Cole's entire existence had been upended in the space of 72 hours. His phone, still dead, still useless, sat on the counter mocking him. He needed to replace it, needed a working number for callbacks. With the deposit pending, he could afford a cheap prepaid phone now. The thought was almost novel, being able to afford something. Evan grabbed his wallet and headed out. The nearest electronics store was a 15-minute walk. His feet still hurt from Sunday's marathon, but the pain had dulled to a manageable ache. He bought the cheapest smartphone they had, a prepaid model for $49, and activated it in the parking lot. The first thing he did was update his contact information on all the job applications. The second thing was text Noah's school to update his emergency contact number. The third was stand there in the parking lot, staring at a phone that could actually receive calls and feel a tiny bit more like a functioning adult. On the way home, he stopped at a grocery store. Real shopping this time, not the desperate calculations of yesterday. He bought bread and milk and eggs and chicken and vegetables and pasta and sauce and cereal and fruit. He bought Noah's favorite snacks. He bought coffee that wasn't the cheapest brand on the shelf. The total came to $87, and Evan paid it without flinching. The cashier asked if he'd found everything okay, and Evan said yes and meant it. Walking home with 4 bags of groceries felt like a small victory. Like maybe, just maybe, he was climbing back toward solid ground. Noah came home from school excited about a field trip next week to the Science Museum. $15 for admission, plus $5 for lunch. Evan said yes immediately. No hesitation, no mental gymnastics about whether they could afford it. Noah's face lit up like Christmas. They made dinner together, actual cooking, not reheating. And Noah chattered about his day while Evan chopped vegetables and tried not to think about how close he'd come to losing all of this. The normalcy of it, the ordinary domestic peace of a Tuesday evening with his kid. It had almost slipped through his fingers. After dinner, Noah settled into homework and Evan checked his email again. Still nothing positive. But sandwiched between 2 more rejections was a message from an unfamiliar address. Dr. Cole, my name is Patricia Vasquez. I'm a reporter with the Arizona Tribune. I'd like to speak with you about the events at Mercy General Hospital last weekend. Would you be available for an interview? Evan stared at the email for a long moment. A reporter? Of course. The story was probably too good to pass up. Doctor fired for saving uninsured patient. It had all the elements of a viral outrage piece. He should say no, should stay quiet, keep his head down, not make waves. The last thing he needed was more attention, more controversy. He was trying to find a job, not become a headline. But another part of him, the part that had walked 10 miles on bleeding feet, the part that had operated on Margaret Chen knowing it would cost him everything, that part wanted people to know. Wanted the world to understand what hospitals were doing, how they were making decisions about who deserved to live based on insurance status and liability calculations. Evan typed out a response. Ms. Vasquez, I'd be willing to speak with you. When did you have in mind? The reply came back within minutes. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., I can come to you. Evan agreed and sent his address. Then he sat back, wondering if he'd just made a terrible mistake. Wednesday morning came with rain, unusual for Arizona. Evan woke to the sound of it drumming against the windows, the sky gray and heavy. He made breakfast, got Noah off to school, and then stood in the shower letting hot water work the lingering soreness from his muscles. At 9:45, he checked the bank app. The $15,000 had cleared. Evan immediately transferred the rent payment, then just stood there watching the confirmation screen, feeling something unclench in his chest that had been tight since Sunday. They weren't going to lose the apartment, not this month, probably not for several months if he was careful. The knock came at exactly 10 o'clock. Patricia Vasquez was in her mid-30s, professional but approachable, carrying a leather bag and an umbrella dripping with rain. Evan invited her in, offered coffee, and they settled at the kitchen table. Thank you for agreeing to speak with me, Patricia said, pulling out a recording device. Do you mind if I record this? Go ahead. She pressed a button and set the device between them. So, Dr. Cole, tell me what happened Saturday night. Evan told her. All of it. Margaret Chen arriving unconscious, the CT scan showing the hematoma, his call to Dr. Hendricks, her refusal to authorize surgery, his decision to operate anyway, the 9-hour procedure, the successful outcome, and then Monday morning's termination. Patricia listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. When Evan finished, she was quiet for a moment. That's remarkable, she said finally, and horrifying. But I have to ask, did you know you'd be fired when you made the decision to operate? I suspected it was possible. But you did it anyway. She would have died otherwise. The hospital would argue you should have transferred her to county. She didn't have time. She'd have died in the ambulance. Evan met Patricia's eyes. And even if she had made it, county's neurosurgery department is overloaded. She might have waited hours for surgery. The outcome would have been catastrophic. Patricia nodded, writing. I spoke with Dr. Hendricks yesterday. She maintains that you violated protocol and exposed the hospital to liability. She says patient safety requires following proper authorization procedures. Patient safety requires saving lives, Evan said quietly. Everything else is just hospital administrators covering their asses. That's a strong statement. It's the truth. Margaret Chen is alive today because I put her life ahead of paperwork. If that makes me a liability, then the system is broken. Patricia smiled slightly. I have a feeling that's going to be my headline. They talked for another hour. Patricia asked about his background, his training, his years at Mercy General. She asked about Noah, about being a single father, about how he was managing after the termination. Evan answered honestly, holding nothing back. When she finally left, promising the article would run in Sunday's paper, Evan felt exhausted but also strangely lighter. He'd told the truth. Whatever came of it, at least he told the truth. The rest of Wednesday passed quietly. Evan applied to more jobs, made dinner, helped Noah with his math homework. Normal evening routine, except Evan kept checking his new phone obsessively, waiting for it to ring with a job offer that never came. Thursday brought more of the same. Application sent into the void. Silence in return. By Friday evening, Evan had applied to 37 positions and received 23 rejections. The remaining 14 hadn't bothered to respond at all. He tried not to let the despair creep back in. He had the Chen family's money. He had time. He just needed to be patient. But patience was hard when every rejection felt like confirmation that he'd made himself unemployable. Friday night, Noah wanted to order pizza and watch a movie. Evan agreed, grateful for the distraction. They settled on the couch with a large pepperoni pizza and some animated comedy Noah had been wanting to see. Halfway through, Noah shifted closer. "Dad?" "Yeah, buddy? Are you okay? Like really okay?" Evan glanced down at his son. "What makes you ask?" "You've been checking your phone like every 5 minutes, and you seem, I don't know, worried." "Smart kid. Too smart. Just work stuff. Nothing for you to worry about." "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." Noah was quiet for a moment. "Michael's mom said you're looking for a new job. Is that true?" So Jennifer had been talking, or Noah had been listening to conversations he wasn't supposed to hear. Either way, the secret was out. "Yeah," Evan admitted. "I'm looking for something new." "Why?" "I thought you liked working at Mercy." "I did, but sometimes things change." "Did something bad happen?" Evan considered lying, considered keeping Noah sheltered from all of this. But Noah deserved something closer to the truth. "I had a disagreement with the hospital administrators about patient care." "What kind of disagreement?" "The kind where I thought we should help someone and they thought we shouldn't." Noah frowned, processing. "Who was right?" "I was," Evan said simply. "But sometimes being right doesn't matter." "That's stupid." "Welcome to adult life, buddy." They watched the rest of the movie in silence, but Noah stayed close, his shoulder pressed against Evan's side. The casual comfort of it, the trust it represented, made Evan's throat tight. He'd protect this. Whatever it took, however long it took to rebuild, he'd protect this. Saturday morning, Evan woke to his phone ringing. Unknown number. He answered cautiously. "Doctor." "Cole, this is Marcus Hale." The name meant nothing to Evan. "Can I help you?" "I certainly hope so." The voice was deep, controlled, but underneath Evan detected something raw. Fear, maybe, or desperation. "I'm the governor of Arizona, and I need to speak with you urgently about a medical matter." Evan sat up straight in bed, suddenly completely awake. "Governor Hale." What kind of medical matter?" "My daughter, she's 15. Last night she was in a car accident, severe head trauma." The governor's voice cracked. "The neurosurgery team at Phoenix Regional says her injuries are beyond their capability. They're talking about transferring her to UCLA, but the flight time. Dr. Cole, she doesn't have that kind of time." Evan's mind was already shifting into clinical mode. What are her injuries specifically? Multiple skull fractures, brain swelling. They said something about herniation risk. I don't understand all the medical terminology, but the doctors here are very clear that without immediate intervention, my daughter will die. A pause. "Dr. Cole, I read Patricia Vasquez's article in this morning's Tribune about what you did for Margaret Chen, about the technique you used that other surgeons won't attempt." "That article published already?" Evan had thought it was scheduled for Sunday. Online edition went live at midnight. "Dr. Cole, I've spoken to 4 neurosurgeons in the last 6 hours. All of them say the same thing, that my daughter's injuries are too severe, too risky, that the technique required is too experimental. But every one of them also mentioned your name. They said if anyone could save her, it would be you." Evan's heart was pounding. "Governor, I'm not currently employed by any hospital. I don't have operating privileges anywhere. Even if I wanted to help, I can get you privileges, I can get you whatever you need. Dr. Cole, please." The governor's voice broke completely. "She's my only child. Her name is Sophie. She wants to be a marine biologist. She plays violin. She volunteers at the animal shelter every weekend. She's 15 years old and she's dying and nobody will help her." Evan closed his eyes, seeing not Sophie Hale, but Noah. Seeing his own child on that operating table, himself in the governor's position, begging someone, anyone, to save his kid. "Where is she now?" "Phoenix Regional, ICU. I need to see her scans, and I need to speak with her neurosurgery team. Anything, whatever you need. Can you come now?" Evan glanced at the clock. 6:47 a.m. Noah was still asleep. "Give me an hour." He ended the call and sat there for a moment, mind racing. This was insane. He'd been fired 3 days ago. He had no hospital privileges, no malpractice insurance, no legal standing to operate on anyone. If something went wrong, and with injuries this severe, things could absolutely go wrong, he'd be personally liable for everything. But the governor's daughter was dying, and nobody else would help. Principles over profit. Evan got up and got dressed. He woke Noah gently, explained he had an emergency medical consultation and would be gone for a few hours. Called Jennifer, who agreed to come stay with Noah. Then he grabbed his old surgical bag, the one he'd kept from residency, filled with his personal instruments, and headed out into the gray morning. Phoenix Regional was a 40-minute drive. Evan made it in 30, his mind running through every possible complication, every technique he might need, every way this could go catastrophically wrong. Governor Marcus Hale met him at the entrance to the ICU, flanked by 2 security personnel. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with iron gray hair and a face that probably usually projected authority, but right now just looked shattered. "Dr. Cole, thank you for coming." The governor's handshake was firm but trembling. "This way." They walked through corridors that seemed too bright, too clean, too normal for what was happening. The governor talked as they walked, filling in details. Sophie had been driving home from a friend's house. A truck had run a red light. T-bone collision. She hadn't been conscious since the impact. In the ICU, Dr. Raymond Torres was waiting. He was young, maybe mid-30s, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Dr. Cole, I've heard about your work." Torres held out a tablet showing Sophie's CT scans. "I'll be honest, this is beyond anything I'm comfortable attempting." Evan studied the images and his heart sank. Multiple depressed skull fractures on the right side, massive subdural hematoma, significant midline shift, and worst of all, early signs of incal herniation. This wasn't just beyond Torres's comfort zone. This was beyond almost anyone's comfort zone. "How long ago was the accident?" Evan asked. 9 hours. The swelling is progressing faster than we'd hoped. She needs surgery immediately." "I agree. But Dr. Cole, the risk of mortality during the procedure is over 70%. And even if she survives, the likelihood of permanent neurological damage is extremely high. I can't in good conscience recommend—" "I'm not asking you to recommend anything," Governor Hale interrupted. His voice was steel-wrapped in desperation. "I'm asking Dr. Cole if he can save my daughter." Torres fell silent. Both men looked at Evan. Evan looked at the scans again, seeing not just the injuries but the girl behind them, 15 years old. Marine biology dreams. Violin. Animal shelter volunteering. A whole life waiting to be lived if someone could just give her the chance. The technique he'd used on Margaret Chen was experimental, unapproved by major medical boards, considered too risky by most surgeons. It involved a modified decompressive craniectomy combined with targeted hypothermia and a drainage system that most neurosurgeons considered reckless. But it had worked. Margaret Chen was alive because of it. "Governor," Evan said carefully, "Dr. Torres is right about the risks. This surgery is extremely dangerous. There's a very real possibility that Sophie won't survive it. And if she does survive, there's a significant chance of permanent brain damage. But there's also a chance she'll be okay. A chance, not a large one. What happens if we don't operate?" "She'll die. Probably within the next few hours." Governor Hale's jaw tightened. "Then we operate. What do you need?" "I need full surgical privileges at this hospital. I need Dr. Torres and his team to assist. I need an OR available immediately. And I need everyone in that room to understand that I'm going to do things that aren't standard protocol." "Done. All of it." The governor turned to Torres. "Make it happen." Torres hesitated only a moment, then nodded. "I'll prep the OR." Things moved fast after that. Evan scrubbed in while Torres assembled the surgical team and explained the situation. The hospital's chief of surgery appeared, looking nervous, clutching paperwork that granted Evan temporary privileges. Evan signed without reading it. In the OR, Sophie Hale looked impossibly small on the table. Evan studied her face, young, peaceful, despite the injuries, completely unaware that her life hung in the balance. "All right," Evan said to the assembled team, "let's save this girl's life." The surgery was brutal. Evan worked for 11 hours straight, Torres assisting, the rest of the team following instructions that probably sounded insane. The modified craniectomy to relieve pressure, the targeted hypothermia to protect brain tissue, the drainage system to manage swelling. Twice, Sophie's vitals crashed and they had to resuscitate. 3 times, Evan was certain they'd lost her. But each time she came back. And finally, impossibly, the bleeding stopped. The swelling began to decrease. Her pupils, which had been fixed and dilated when Evan started, began to respond to light. At 9:23 p.m., Evan stepped out of the OR to find Governor Hale pacing the hallway like a caged animal. The man's face was gray with exhaustion and fear. "She's alive," Evan said simply. Governor Hale's knees buckled. He caught himself against the wall, pressing one hand over his mouth. Is she going to be okay? The next 72 hours are critical, but she made it through surgery. That's the biggest hurdle. The governor crossed the distance between them in 3 strides and pulled Evan into a fierce hug. Thank you. I can't. Save it until she wakes up, Evan said quietly. But inside, he felt something shift, something settle into place. This was why he'd become a surgeon, not for the paycheck or the prestige or the respect. For this, for the impossible saves, for the lives hanging in the balance, for the chance to give someone back their daughter. Principles over profit, always. Evan left the hospital near midnight, exhausted in a way that went beyond physical. The kind of tired that settled into your bones after holding someone's life in your hands for 11 hours. Governor Hale had tried to talk to him, tried to offer thanks and promises and whatever else people said when you just saved their child, but Evan had waved it all off. There would be time for that later, if Sophie woke up, if she recovered. Right now he just needed to get home to Noah. The drive back was a blur of streetlights and empty roads. Evan's hands were steady on the wheel, surgeon's hands, trained to stay calm under pressure. But his mind kept replaying moments from the surgery. The second time Sophie's heart had stopped, the way her brain tissue had looked when he'd opened the skull, the terrible fragility of a 15-year-old's life reduced to blood pressure numbers and pupil responses. He'd done everything right. He was almost certain of that, but almost left room for 1,000 complications, 1,000 ways the next 72 hours could still go wrong. Jennifer was asleep on his couch when he got home, some late-night show playing quietly on the TV. She stirred when he came in, blinking herself awake. "Evan, how'd it go?" "Long. Thanks for staying with Noah." "Of course." She stood, gathering her things. "He was worried about you, kept asking when you'd be back." Guilt twisted in Evan's chest. "I'll check on him." After Jennifer left, Evan stood in Noah's doorway watching his son sleep. 12 years old and growing so fast it terrified him sometimes. In a few years, Noah would be Sophie Hale's age, would be driving, would be out in the world where trucks ran red lights, and lives could change in an instant. Evan crossed to the bed and pressed a kiss to Noah's forehead, breathing in the familiar scent of his kid's shampoo. Noah stirred but didn't wake. "Love you, buddy," Evan whispered. He went to his own room, stripped off his clothes, and fell into bed without bothering to shower. Sleep took him hard and fast, dreamless and deep. Sunday morning arrived with Noah shaking his shoulder. Dad, wake up, your phone's ringing." Evan surfaced from unconsciousness like a drowning man, fumbling for the phone on his nightstand. Unknown number. He answered with a voice that sounded like gravel. "Dr. Cole?" A woman's voice, professional. "This is Cheryl Matthews from Phoenix Regional. Governor Hale asked me to call you. Sophie is awake." The words hit him like electricity. "She's awake? How is she?" Responsive to commands, pupils equal and reactive. She knew her name, knew her father. "Dr. Torres says it's remarkable. He wants you to come in if you're available." Evan was already getting out of bed. "I'll be there in 40 minutes. He showered in record time, dressed, and explained to Noah that he had to go back to the hospital. Noah just nodded, used to his father's unpredictable schedule, and settled in with a bowl of cereal and his laptop. The drive to Phoenix Regional felt different in daylight, less urgent, but somehow more real. Last night had been about crisis and instinct and doing whatever it took to keep Sophie alive. Today was about consequences and reality and whether his gamble had actually paid off. Governor Hale was waiting outside the ICU again, but he looked like a different man. The haunted desperation was gone, replaced by something brighter. Relief, maybe. Or hope. Dr. Cole. The governor's handshake was firm, his eyes clear. She's asking for you. Asking for me? I told her you saved her life. She wants to thank you. They walked to Sophie's room together. She was propped up in bed, head wrapped in bandages, connected to various monitors and IVs, but her eyes were open and alert, tracking them as they entered. Sophie, this is Dr. Cole, Governor Hale said gently. Hi. Her voice was weak but clear. Dad says you did brain surgery on me. Evan moved to her bedside, checking her pupils with a penlight, watching her track the movement. Good response. I did. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck. A small smile. Oh, wait. I did get hit by a truck. The joke, weak as it was, made Evan's chest loosen. Sense of humor intact. That was a good sign. Do you remember the accident? Not really. I remember driving, then I remember waking up here and Dad was crying. She glanced at her father, which was super weird because Dad never cries. Governor Hale's expression was a complicated mix of emotions. I made an exception. Dr. Torres appeared in the doorway, looking exhausted but pleased. Dr. Cole, can I speak with you outside? They stepped into the hallway, leaving the governor with his daughter. This is unprecedented, Torres said quietly. I've never seen a recovery this rapid from injuries that severe. What you did in there, I've never seen anything like it. The technique's been around for a while. Most surgeons just won't use it. Because the risk is enormous. So is the risk of doing nothing. Torres studied him for a long moment. The hospital administration wants to speak with you. They're talking about offering you a position. Evan blinked. What? You just saved the governor's daughter using a procedure most of us wouldn't touch. You've become a very valuable asset very quickly. Torres's expression was complicated. Though I have to ask, would you have done this surgery if it wasn't the governor's daughter, if it was just another uninsured patient? The question landed like a punch. Evan met Torres's eyes directly. Yes, because she deserved a chance to live, same as Margaret Chen. Even knowing the risks? Especially knowing the risks, that's when the choice matters most. Torres nodded slowly, something like respect crossing his face. The administration wants to meet with you tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. I'd take the meeting if I were you. After Torres left, Evan went back to Sophie's room. The governor was holding his daughter's hand, and they were talking quietly about something that made Sophie laugh, a sound that seemed impossibly precious, given where she'd been 24 hours ago. Dr. Cole, Governor Hale said, standing, can we speak privately? They stepped outside again. The governor looked at Evan with an intensity that was probably the same expression he used during legislative negotiations. What you did for my daughter, the governor began, I can never repay, but I can make sure you don't have to fight alone anymore. I spoke with the Phoenix Regional Board this morning. They're prepared to offer you a position with full privileges and whatever resources you need. Dr. Torres mentioned. But I want to offer you something else too. The governor's voice dropped. I've been thinking about what you said in that article, about hospitals making decisions based on insurance rather than need, about patients being denied care because of liability concerns. It's wrong, and I want to help fix it. Evan's pulse quickened. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we build something new, a clinic focused on the patients everyone else refuses, the ones without insurance, without resources, without anyone to advocate for them. You'd have complete medical autonomy. I'd handle the funding and the politics. Governor, that's ambitious. I know. But you saved my daughter when 4 other surgeons said it couldn't be done. You saved Margaret Chen when your own hospital said she didn't matter. Imagine what you could do with actual support instead of fighting administrators every step of the way. The idea was staggering. Everything Evan had ever wanted. The ability to practice medicine based on need rather than profit, to help people without bureaucratic interference, to prove that the system could be different. I need time to think about this, Evan said carefully. Of course. Take all the time you need, but Dr. Cole? The governor's expression was fierce. Don't let them make you small. Don't let them convince you that what you do isn't extraordinary. My daughter is alive because you refuse to accept what everyone else said was impossible. That's not a liability. That's exactly what medicine should be. Evan drove home in a daze, the governor's words echoing in his head. By the time he pulled into his apartment complex, his phone had rung 6 times with calls from numbers he didn't recognize. He ignored them all. Inside, Noah was exactly where Evan had left him, laptop open, homework spread across the kitchen table. "How'd it go?" Noah asked without looking up. "The patient's doing well." "That's good." Noah closed his laptop. "Hey, Dad, there's this thing at school next week, a career day. They want parents to come talk about their jobs." Evan felt something twist in his chest. "Buddy, I don't know if that's a good idea right now." "Why not? You're a brain surgeon. That's way cooler than Michael's dad who does accounting." "I'm between jobs at the moment." Noah looked up, frowning. "But you just did surgery yesterday. How are you between jobs?" "It's complicated." "Everything's complicated with you lately." There was frustration in Noah's voice, the kind that came from being kept in the dark. "Dad, just tell me what's going on. I'm not a little kid anymore." Evan sat down at the table, suddenly tired again. Noah was right. He was 12, not 6. He deserved the truth. "Okay, here's what's going on. I got fired from Mercy General last Monday for performing surgery on a patient the hospital said I shouldn't operate on. Since then, I've been trying to find a new job. Yesterday, the governor called because his daughter needed emergency surgery and nobody else would do it. I operated on her and she's going to be okay. And now I have some decisions to make about what comes next." Noah processed this information with the seriousness of someone much older. "Did you get fired because you saved someone's life?" "Basically." "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." "I agree." "So what are you going to do?" Evan looked at his son, at this kid who'd been watching his father navigate an impossible situation without complaint, without fear, with nothing but trust that Dad would figure it out. And something in Evan's chest settled. "I'm going to build something better," he said. "Something where saving lives matters more than paperwork." Noah grinned. "Can I help?" "Maybe. But first you need to finish your homework." Monday morning, Evan walked into Phoenix Regional wearing the only suit he owned, the one he'd worn to Sarah's funeral 7 years ago. It still fit, barely. The hospital administrator's office was on the top floor, all glass walls and expensive furniture that screamed money and power. 3 people were waiting for him. Dr. Helen Price, the hospital's chief of surgery, Marcus Chen, the CFO, and Governor Hale, who'd apparently decided to attend the meeting despite not technically being part of the hospital. "Dr. Cole, thank you for coming." Dr. Price was in her 60s, silver-haired, with the kind of presence that commanded rooms. "Please sit." Evan sat, feeling wildly out of place among all this corporate polish. "We'll get straight to the point," Dr. Price continued. "Your surgery on Sophie Hale was remarkable. The technique you used, the outcome you achieved, frankly, it's the kind of medicine this hospital wants to be known for. We'd like to offer you a position as chief of neurosurgery with full privileges and a significant salary increase from what you were making at Mercy General." The offer hung in the air between them. Chief of neurosurgery. It was more than Evan had ever hoped for, more than he'd been before. Security, prestige, the ability to practice at the highest level. But there was something in Dr. Price's expression that made him hesitate. Something calculating. "That's a generous offer," Evan said carefully. "What's the catch?" Marcus Chen leaned forward. "No catch. We just ask that you follow hospital protocols and work within our established guidelines for patient authorization." There it was. The same trap that had caught him at Mercy General, just wrapped in prettier paper. "So if another Margaret Chen walks through those doors," Evan said slowly, "and she has no insurance and no authorization, I'm supposed to let her die?" "We'd transfer her to county," Dr. Price said smoothly, "just like protocol requires." "And if she doesn't have time for a transfer?" "Then we'd make her comfortable. Dr. Cole, we understand your passion for patient care. We admire it. But this hospital cannot expose itself to the kind of liability that comes from unauthorized procedures." Evan looked at Governor Hale, who'd been silent through this exchange. The governor's expression was carefully neutral, but his eyes were sharp. "With respect, Dr. Price, Evan said. I'm going to have to decline your offer. The room went very quiet. Dr. Price's eyebrows rose. Dr. Cole, perhaps you don't understand the opportunity we're offering. I understand perfectly. You want the positive press from hiring the surgeon who saved the governor's daughter, but you want me to practice the same medicine that got Margaret Chen almost killed. I'm not interested. Dr. Cole, Marcus Chen's voice had hardened. You should think very carefully before turning down a position of this caliber. Given your recent termination, you may not receive another offer like this. Then I guess I won't. Evan stood up. Governor Hale stood too, a small smile playing at his lips. Gentlemen, Dr. Price, the governor said pleasantly, I think we're done here. Dr. Cole, shall we? They walked out together, leaving 3 stunned administrators in their wake. In the elevator, the governor started laughing. That was magnificent. Did you see Chen's face? I probably just committed career suicide. No, you committed career honesty. There's a difference. The elevator doors opened to the lobby. My offer still stands, by the way. The clinic. Full autonomy. No administrators telling you who deserves to live. Evan thought about Margaret Chen, alive because he'd refused to follow protocol. Thought about Sophie Hale, awake and joking because he'd taken a risk nobody else would. Thought about all the patients who'd never get a chance because hospitals cared more about liability than lives. Tell me more about this clinic, Evan said. They spent the next 3 hours in a coffee shop downtown, sketching out possibilities on napkins. The governor had connections, funding sources, political capital to burn. Evan had medical expertise and a growing reputation for impossible saves. Together, they could build something that didn't exist yet, a place where patient need drove decisions instead of insurance status. It won't be easy, Governor Hale warned. You'll face opposition from every hospital in the state. They'll call you reckless, dangerous. They'll try to pull your license. They can try? And there's no guarantee it'll work. Most clinics like this fail within the first year. Most clinics like this aren't backed by a governor. Hale smiled. True. So you're in? Evan thought about Noah, about the future he wanted to build for his son. A future where doing the right thing didn't cost you everything, where saving lives was rewarded instead of punished. I'm in. They shook hands across the table, and Evan felt something shift. This was bigger than just a job. This was a chance to change how medicine worked, to prove that a different system was possible. It was terrifying, and it was exactly right. The next 2 weeks blurred together in a whirlwind of planning and preparation. Governor Hale moved fast, leveraging connections and calling in favors. He secured a building in a lower-income neighborhood, arranged equipment donations from retiring doctors, and navigated the regulatory nightmare of establishing a new medical facility. Evan focused on the medical side, protocols that put patients first, partnerships with specialists willing to volunteer time, outreach to communities that had been underserved by traditional hospitals. He worked 18-hour days, fueled by coffee and the growing certainty that this was what he was meant to do. Patricia Vasquez's article had gone viral by the second week, spawning think pieces and debates about medical ethics and healthcare access. Evan did a few interviews, carefully explaining his philosophy, that medicine should serve people, not profit margins. That lives had value regardless of insurance status. That sometimes the right choice was the difficult one. The response was overwhelming. Donations poured in from people who'd lost loved ones to bureaucratic medicine, from doctors who felt trapped by hospital politics, from communities who'd been told their lives didn't matter enough to save. Within 10 days, they had enough funding to operate for 6 months. Sophie Hale was released from the hospital on day 12, her recovery so complete that Dr. Torres called it miraculous. She came to visit Evan at the new clinic site, her father beside her, to see the space that was being built. This is because of me? Sophie asked, looking around at construction crews and medical equipment being installed. This is because your father believes people deserve better health care, Evan said. You just gave him a reason to do something about it. Will you keep saving people here, like you saved me? That's the plan. Sophie smiled, bright and alive and 15 years old with her whole future ahead of her. Good. The world needs more doctors like you. After they left, Evan stood in what would become the main examination room, imagining it filled with patients. People like Margaret Chen, who'd been told they didn't matter. People like Sophie Hale, who'd been told they were beyond help. People who just needed someone to say yes instead of no. He pulled out his phone and called Noah. "Hey buddy, you busy?" "Just homework." "What's up? Want to come see the clinic? I could use your opinion on something." 20 minutes later, Noah arrived on his bike, helmet askew, eyes bright with curiosity. Evan gave him the full tour, explaining what each room would be, how they'd operate, who they'd serve. "So basically," Noah said when they finished, "you're building a hospital for people who can't afford regular hospitals." "Something like that." "That's pretty cool, Dad." They stood together in the empty lobby, father and son, looking at walls that would soon hold stories of lives saved and second chances given. "Remember Career Day?" Noah asked. "The thing at school I mentioned?" "Yeah." "Can you come? I want to tell everyone my dad builds hospitals." Evan's throat went tight. "I'd be honored." That night, after Noah was asleep, Evan sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, finalizing hiring plans for the clinic. They'd need nurses, support staff, specialists willing to work for less than market rate because they believed in the mission. It was ambitious, maybe too ambitious, but 3 weeks ago he'd been fired and broken and walking 10 miles with $12 in his pocket. Now he was building something that mattered, something that would outlast him. His phone buzzed with a text from Governor Hale. "Board approved the final permits. We open in 3 weeks. You ready for this?" Evan looked around his small apartment, at the life he'd rebuilt from nothing, at the future he was constructing one decision at a time. He typed back, "Ready as I'll ever be." 3 weeks until the clinic opened. 3 weeks to finalize protocols, hire staff, prepare for the flood of patients who'd been turned away by everyone else. 3 weeks to prove that medicine could be different, better, more human. Evan closed the laptop and went to stand at the window, looking out over the city lights. Somewhere out there, people were sick, injured, dying, told they didn't matter because they couldn't pay. Soon, they'd have somewhere to go, someone to say yes when everyone else said no. The walk that had started with a cardboard box and bleeding feet was leading somewhere Evan had never imagined, somewhere harder and more hopeful than anything he'd planned. But that was okay. The best things in life were never planned anyway. They were chosen. One difficult decision at a time, one patient at a time, one principle at a time. And Evan was just getting started. The 3 weeks vanished like smoke. Evan barely slept, moving between the clinic construction site and home in a blur of decisions and preparations. Hiring interviews conducted in half-finished examination rooms. Supply orders placed at midnight. Protocol documents written and rewritten until the words stopped making sense. Every day brought new challenges, new obstacles, new reasons why this shouldn't work. And every day, Evan pushed through anyway. Noah adapted to his father's chaotic schedule with the resilience of a kid who'd already weathered his mother's death and countless overnight shifts. He did his homework at the clinic sometimes, sprawled on the floor of what would become the waiting room, asking questions about medical equipment and offering surprisingly useful opinions on paint colors. "Dad, nobody wants to stare at beige walls when they're sick," Noah said one evening, looking critically at the sample squares. "Go with the blue. It's calmer." Evan went with the blue. Governor Hale proved to be more than just political support. He showed up in jeans and work gloves one Saturday to help install shelving, his security detail looking uncomfortable with their boss wielding a power drill. He brought Sophie along too, still healing but insistent on contributing somehow. She organized the supply closet with the methodical precision of someone who'd decided that saving lives required excellent organization. "Everything has a place," she explained to Evan, labeling boxes with color-coded markers. "When you're in a hurry, you need to know exactly where to find what you need." 15 years old and already understanding emergency medicine better than some residents Evan had worked with. The staff came together slowly, then all at once. Dr. Maria Santos, a family medicine physician who'd left private practice after watching too many patients die from treatable conditions because they couldn't afford care. Nurse Rachel Kim, who'd been working in hospital emergency rooms for 20 years and was tired of turning people away. James Peterson, a physician assistant who'd grown up poor and never forgotten what it felt like to be told you didn't deserve medical attention. Each one had a story. Each one had chosen principle over profit at some point and paid a price for it. We're building something that shouldn't have to exist, Dr. Santos said during their first staff meeting, held around a folding table in the unfinished break room. In a just world, this clinic wouldn't be necessary. But we don't live in a just world. We live in this one. So let's make it better. The night before opening day, Evan stood alone in the completed clinic, walking through rooms that smelled of fresh paint and possibility. The examination rooms were simple but fully equipped. The small surgical suite was state-of-the-art, thanks to donations from retiring doctors and medical supply companies that believed in the mission. The waiting room had comfortable chairs and Noah's blue walls, and a sign that read, "All are welcome here," in 5 languages. It was nothing like the gleaming corporate perfection of Phoenix Regional or Mercy General. It was better. It was real. Evan's phone buzzed with a text from Noah. "Good luck tomorrow, Dad. You're going to change the world." The confidence of a 12-year-old who still believed his father could do anything. Evan hoped Noah was right. Opening day arrived with sunshine and a line of people stretching around the block by 7 a.m., an hour before they were scheduled to open. Evan stood at the entrance, staring at faces young and old, every shade of skin, every kind of story. People who'd been turned away from emergency rooms, people who'd been rationing insulin because they couldn't afford both medicine and rent. People who'd given up on the healthcare system ever caring about them. They'd heard about the clinic, about the doctor who'd been fired for saving someone's life, about the governor who'd decided to do something about it, and they'd come, desperate and hopeful, to see if any of it was true. "Dr. Cole?" Rachel stood beside him, looking at the crowd. "We open in 15 minutes. You ready?" "No," Evan said honestly, "but let's do it anyway." They unlocked the doors at exactly 8 a.m. The first patient was an elderly man named Carlos Rodriguez, who'd been living with untreated diabetes for 3 years because he couldn't afford both his medication and his grandson's school supplies. Dr. Santos took his case, spending an hour with him, setting up a treatment plan and arranging medication assistance and making sure he understood he didn't have to choose between his health and his family anymore. The second patient was a young mother named Jessica Chen. No relation to Margaret, just one of thousands of Chens in Arizona, whose daughter needed surgery for a hernia, but every hospital had told her the wait list was 6 months long and the cost would be $15,000. Evan examined the little girl, scheduled surgery for the following week, and quoted a price of exactly $0. Jessica cried. Her daughter asked if Evan was magic. Evan said no, just stubborn. By noon, they'd seen 17 patients. By 5 p.m., 34. By the time they locked the doors at 8 p.m., exhausted and running on adrenaline, they'd treated 48 people. 48 lives that mattered. 48 people who'd been told no by everyone else and finally heard yes. The staff gathered in the break room afterward, too tired to move but too energized to leave. Rachel passed around pizza from the place down the street. "Doctor." Santos opened a bottle of cheap champagne someone had donated. They sat in exhausted silence for a few minutes, just breathing. "So," James said finally, "that was intense." "That was day 1, Evan replied. "Tomorrow we do it again." "And the day after that," Dr. Santos added. "And the day after that," Rachel finished. They clinked plastic cups filled with champagne and made a toast to impossible work and necessary medicine and all the patients still waiting. Governor Hale stopped by later that evening, after the staff had gone home, and Evan was doing paperwork in his new office. The governor looked pleased and exhausted in equal measure. "I heard it went well today," Hale said, settling into the chair across from Evan's desk. 48 patients. That's remarkable for a first day." "It's not enough. Did you see the line when we closed? We must have turned away 30 people. Then we expand, hire more staff, open more days. Evan, you can't save everyone in one day. Doesn't mean I shouldn't try." Hale smiled. "You know what I realized today? When I asked you to save Sophie, I thought I was asking for a favor. I didn't understand I was recruiting a revolutionary. I'm not a revolutionary. I'm just a doctor who thinks people shouldn't die because they're poor. That's what makes you revolutionary. Most people think that's a nice idea. You actually did something about it." Hale stood to leave, then paused. "By the way, Sophie's violin recital is next month. She wants you to come. Something about you saving her hands as well as her brain." I'll be there. After Hale left, Evan sat in the quiet office, reviewing the day's cases. Diabetes, hypertension, infections, injuries, chronic conditions left untreated for years. Each file represented a person who'd been failed by the system. Each one represented a chance to do better. His phone rang. Unknown number. Evan almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Dr. Cole? This is Margaret Chen. It took Evan a moment to place the name. Then it hit him. His first impossible save, the patient who'd started everything. Mrs. Chen, how are you? I'm wonderful, completely recovered. I called to thank you properly. My son David told me what happened, that you lost your job because of me. I didn't lose my job because of you, Mrs. Chen. I lost my job because I chose to save your life. There's a difference. Still, I heard about your clinic, about what you're doing. I wanted you to know that I volunteer at a community center in my neighborhood. We serve a lot of people who don't have access to health care. I told them about your clinic, and they want to know if you'd be willing to do outreach there, maybe once a month, set up a temporary clinic. Evan thought about 48 patients today, and 30 more turned away. Thought about all the neighborhoods in Phoenix that didn't have access to care. Thought about how much one clinic could really change. Then he thought about what Dr. Santos had said. We don't live in a just world. We live in this one. So let's make it better. Yes, Evan said. We can do that. When did you have in mind? They talked for 20 minutes, planning logistics. By the time Evan hung up, he'd committed to monthly outreach clinics in 3 different neighborhoods. More work, more patients, more chances to prove that medicine could be different. He should have been daunted. Instead, he felt energized. The weeks blurred into months. The clinic found its rhythm, chaotic, exhausting, occasionally heartbreaking, but undeniably alive. They expanded hours, hired more staff, added specialties. The waiting room was never empty. Governor Hale's political capital proved invaluable when the state medical board started asking questions about Evan's unorthodox methods. Hale reminded them politely but firmly that innovation often looked like rule-breaking until it became standard practice. The board backed off. Phoenix Regional's administration tried to poach Evan twice more with increasingly generous offers. He declined both times without hesitation. Dr. Hendricks from Mercy General sent an email in month 3 asking if Evan would consider consulting on a difficult case. He almost deleted it, but curiosity made him read the details. A patient with a subdural hematoma, no insurance, no authorization. They wanted to transfer to county, but the patient wouldn't survive the transport. Evan wrote back, operate, save the patient, fire whoever tells you not to. Or send them to my clinic and we'll do it here. Dr. Hendricks never responded, but Evan heard through the medical community grapevine that Mercy General had performed the surgery. Baby steps toward a better system. Noah's career day came and went. Evan showed up in scrubs and talked about what it meant to be a doctor who put patients first. Half the kids asked questions about blood and surgeries. The other half asked why he'd gotten fired. Evan answered honestly, because he'd refused to let someone die over paperwork. The teacher looked uncomfortable. Noah looked proud. That was enough. Sophie Hale's violin recital was beautiful and slightly off-key in the way of all teenage performances. She played a complicated piece with fierce concentration, and when she finished, she looked directly at Evan and smiled. Alive. Thriving. 15 years old with a future that almost didn't happen. After the recital, Sophie found him in the crowd. Dr. Cole, I've been thinking about what I want to do with my life. Marine biology, right? I'm adding pre-med. I want to be a surgeon like you, someone who saves people everyone else gives up on. Evan's throat went tight. That's a hard road, Sophie. You sure? I'm sure. You gave me my life back. I want to give other people theirs. Governor Hale appeared beside his daughter, overhearing. I've created a monster. Now I have to worry about her doing dangerous surgeries on uninsured patients. The world needs more monsters like that, Evan said. By month 6, the clinic was treating over 200 patients a week. The financial model shouldn't have worked. They charged on a sliding scale, often nothing at all. But donations kept coming. Small amounts from grateful patients. Larger amounts from people who'd read about the clinic and wanted to support it. Grant money from foundations that believed in their mission. They weren't getting rich, but they were surviving, and more importantly, their patients were surviving. Carlos Rodriguez's diabetes was under control. His grandson had finished the school year with honors. Jessica Chen's daughter had recovered completely from her hernia surgery and was back to playing soccer. Margaret Chen's monthly outreach clinic had expanded to weekly visits, serving hundreds of people who'd never had consistent healthcare before. Every patient had a story. Every story mattered. One evening in month 7, Evan was doing paperwork in his office when Rachel knocked on the door. "Dr. Cole? There's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she said it's important." Evan looked up from patient files. "Who is it?" "Dr. Patricia Hendricks, from Mercy General." Evan's first instinct was to say no, but curiosity won. "Send her in." Dr. Hendricks entered, looking older than Evan remembered, or maybe just more tired. She stood awkwardly in the doorway, clearly uncomfortable. "Dr. Cole, thank you for seeing me.